When we play 1e4, opening up our bishop and queen and staking out important territory in the center, black is not obliged to play e5 in return. There are many other options that are used by players, mostly advanced players, and you need to be prepared to meet them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detailed analysis here because as you're starting out in chess, you won't find these openings in too many of your competitive games. Most of them will just start with e4, e5. But still, let's see what happens if, for example, your opponent decides to play the Sicilian defense, c5. Now, black is not placing a pawn directly in the center, but it is still a good opening move because black is preventing you from putting two pawns in the center, since if you advance your d-pawn now, black will capture it. That's why you should prepare by moving your pawn to c3. Now you can safely get a pawn to d4. In most cases, black will be prepared for this move and will choose between bringing out a knight or putting a pawn in the center. Generally, putting the pawn in the center is considered the better plan, and you should be prepared to capture this pawn, then bring out your knight, which black will probably pin, then you unpin and you castle, and now you're finally ready to put your pawn back in the center with d4. Your pawn will become isolated after the capture, but notice that black can't win it, although it looks weak at the moment. If black plays bishop f3 and then queen takes d4, you play bishop c6 check and you win black's queen. So you're likely to get to this kind of position, and then you'll be able to play knight c3 and chase the queen around, bring your bishop out, move your queen, connect your rooks. This is a pretty easy position to play. Of course, if you follow our entire standard repertoire, you'll be playing the Tarrasch defense as black against d4, and you'll know all about isolated d-pawns. But even if not, every chess player should know how to play both sides of isolated pawn positions, so this is a good learning experience as well as a good practical opening. Now, after you play c3, black can also choose knight f6, in which case you kick the knight into the center and then establish your nice pawn chain. This pawn chain is at the heart of our strategy against most of the alternative black openings. You'll have a pawn at e5 that keeps black from stationing the knight at f6, where it is supposed to stand guard against the castled king and protect it from invaders. Black can't do that now, so can chip away at the center and then has to get castled, so will probably move the pawn up. Then you just pile the pressure on the knight so that it retreats. You can retreat your bishop. And again, you have a pretty good game here. You know what to do next. You're going to bring out your knight on the king's side. You're going to castle. Then you're going to bring out your other knight, connect the rooks, and follow the standard opening advice. So the position is easy to play. Now, sometimes after c3, especially in beginners' games, black will try to head for the same kind of Sicilian defense they want to play in the main lines, but you get a big center, and eventually they're going to trade the pawns, but notice that you have those nice two pawns in the center, and even if black makes a fianchetto, you can just protect your strong center, and again, you should be very happy to play this position. Finally, let's look at what happens if they play e6 and head for a sort of French defense. Well, after e5, we are, in fact, in the very variation of the French defense we're going to look at next. This is the French defense, where black uses a pawn at e6 to support a companion at d5 and therefore place a stake in the center. We can't stop black from playing d5, so we take our part of the center, and now we're going to establish a nice front at e5. Anyone who plays the French as black is going to know that they're supposed to play c5 here to try to contest our powerful pawn chain, and we are going to support it with c3. Then a pair of knights are naturally developed, and now black has many different plans, most of which will transpose, but we'll concentrate on the main one. Here the queen comes to b6, and it keeps an eye on our pawn at b2 while placing even more pressure at d4. But this pressure is deceptive, because we just play bishop d3 and get ready to castle, and this sets a nasty little trap. Of course black can trade pawns, but now he can't take the pawn, because on knight takes d4, we take the knight, and then a discovered attack on the queen with a check wins the queen. Black has to respond to the check, and so we're going to win the black queen. So our pawn is not yet at risk. That's why black is usually going to play bishop to d7, and then we just castle, allowing black to capture this pawn. Fine. We'll trade again. Now we don't have the big check move. We just bring a knight to c3 and we offer up yet another pawn. And here black has a choice. The move a6 is the one recommended by all the books here, but first let's see, why not just play queen takes e5, as many players will. We chase the queen, which has to run away, and then, because the e-pawn is pinned, we win back one of our pawns right away. And black can develop and attack our h-pawn, so we have to move that out of the way. And now it looks as though black is going to get castled quickly, but after we trade, we can bring our queen out to g4, and we will be able to attack the king side. Look, our bishop attacks the king side, and our rook can come over. So this is a promising position for white. Even though we're still down a pawn, you'll get great chances to attack. Now let's see what happens if black just puts the pawn at a6, as the books recommend. I suggest queen e2 here. Now you're getting ready to connect the rooks by bringing out your bishop, and you'll hang on to that e-pawn, which is, after all, worth something. Why toss it away for nothing? Black has to get the pieces out somehow, and there are a number of ways to do this. Let's see if the knight comes out first. Then the knight comes out and attacks our pawn at e5, so we need to defend it. And that's why we moved our king to h1, you see, because now we can move the f-pawn out and everything is defended. And the big expert on the French defense, John Watson, takes the bishop move to c5 as being his main line. So I'm going to suggest here that instead of moving the bishop to d2, which is John's suggestion since it can't go to e3, my preference is to play the rook to d1, and then you might see something like queen f2 to get the queens off, since black is up a pawn. But as usual, the queen comes to g4, and here John Watson suggests queenside castling, and I think that after that we'll prepare to get the queenside attack going. And despite being a pawn down, I rather like white's position. But of course it's up to you to play this in competition and see how it works for you. Let's now consider the famous Caro-Kann defense. This is a very good defense and has been a specialty of former world champion Anatoly Karpov. Once again, we're going to set up our pawn chain, and now the recommended move for black is to bring the bishop out, before closing things off with e6. Then you just play normal moves getting ready to castle. You bring your knight out, you bring your bishop out, and then after black, say, strikes back at the center with c5, which is a good recommended move, almost anything black plays you're just going to castle anyway. And then when the pressure builds at d4, you just put a pawn here. And this looks somewhat similar to our French defense, except that black has a bishop outside the pawn chain at f5, which works a little bit better for black. So the position is about even here, but that's not a problem, because if you have an even position when you're white, you're ready to play comfortable moves, and this is a much easier approach than, for example, memorizing 18 to 20 moves of theory of the main line of each of the different Caro-Kann positions. I'm trying to choose lines for you that don't require a lot of work, because for now you should be concentrating on e4, e5. As you become a better player, you'll need to know more and more about these other openings, but you might even stick with my recommendations because they're pretty good for white in most cases. This is a very comfortable position to play. You know what you have to do next. You have to connect the rooks and then start building your strategies for the middle game. So this is a nice simple antidote to the Caro-Kann. Let's move on to some of the rarer openings now.